Here we go. So welcome everyone to a new year of panels of accessibility specialists hosted by OZeWAI. OZeWAI is a not-for-profit here in Australia. We've after 20 years of running our own conference, we now partner with other people's conferences and run these online events. Please support us by either joining our subscribing mailing list or join membership, our paid membership. We have an associate membership for $50 and it goes up to professionals. You can learn a lot through OZeWAI, and we've got some benefits that we're still growing, including these panels. So I would like to start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting today in Canberra, and pay respect to the elders of the Ngunnawal Nation, past and present. I extend this respect to all Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander peoples in attendance today. And I encourage you to please also put in the chat where you're joining us from, maybe your name and your role, and who you pay your respects to if you're in Australia, and possibly in Indigenous cultures overseas as well, if you would like to do that. My name's Bri Norton. I'm co-chair of OZeWAI with Amanda Mace. We seem to be taking turns in moderating these panels, and we're really enjoying them. I've been in the accessibility space now for quite a long time, and at various levels in government. And I really love being a part of OZeWAI and meeting all these people. I know that we need the support from each other as accessibility specialists, so really love to have you here. I'm going to go around the squares I've got here and just ask our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with our international guest, Derek, from Salesforce, VP Accessibility at Salesforce. If you'd like to do a little intro for us, that'd be great.
Happy to. So I'm Derek Featherstone. I'm the VP of Product Accessibility and Inclusive Design here at Salesforce. Been doing accessibility work for, I think, 25 years now, which is painful to say and exciting to say because I still feel like I learn new things every day. Very, very happy to be here, and OZeWAI holds a special place in my heart, having been involved in different OZeWAI events over many trips over many years to Australia. So I feel like I'm almost there, but not almost there.
No, it's great to have you, Derek, and we do remember fondly your workshops and your presentations. Thank you so much. We've also got Sean Murphy from Telstra. Would you like to give your intro there, Sean?
Good day, everyone. I'm the accessibility lead / manager, or one of, inside Telstra. We have a fairly large team, sitting around 17 people. So in Australia, we're one of the biggest, I think we're one of the biggest, I should say, teams that has an accessibility program. The team's been set up over the last 4 years, supporting all our consumer-facing and some enterprise products, plus other areas in the company that keep reaching out to us to push the needle for accessibility in the right direction. I've been involved in accessibility and developing assistive technologies or projects of that nature for more the years than I want to count, and I don't have enough fingers to count. But like I've worked for Freedom Scientific in their screen reader world. I've worked on projects with our Human Rights Commission in their artificial intelligence and how that impacts people with disabilities and accessibility, and so on. So I've been around the traps a bit. I've even presented at the OZeWAI, one of the OZeWAI sessions a couple of years ago. So very good organisation to be involved in, and I'm glad to be here to share my knowledge.
Thanks so much, Sean. And it is wonderful to have you join us when we do we have our OZeWAI booths at some of our conferences, and you're there to do some demonstrations and chat with people with your wonderful guide dog as well. So thank you. And Gerry, would you like to do an intro for us as well?
Yeah, sure. So great to be in the company that I'm in today. Derek, I've been to one or two of your talks, and we've connected a number of ways. We also use Salesforce quite a bit at the ABC. In fact, I was talking to some people just yesterday about some email templates that are going to be going out, that will be going out through Salesforce. So seeing the accessibility smarts built into the tool is always refreshing when we're looking at a tool that we use as an organization. And of course, Sean, I've known you for a while, and our internet connection here is through Telstra, so we have that connection as well. My name is Gerry Neustatl. I'm the lead accessibility specialist at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. The ABC is the national public broadcaster. It's funded and it's owned by all Australians. So it's really important that all of the products that we have, which include products like ABC iView, ABC Listen, ABC News, ABC Kids, a whole lot of brands that everyone knows, they need to be available to everyone. We operate with a fairly small team, unlike Sean's group there. It's a fairly small team of dedicated accessibility professionals, which is why we extend the opportunity to influence accessibility around the enterprise. But we'll talk about that later on, no doubt.
No, it's great to have you, Gerry. And it was really exciting at Web Directions. We did get to meet some of the people that were doing some of your research around, some of the autoplay aspects. Was a very interesting talk. So if you get a chance to listen to the rest of the team, they're all doing some great things. Well, look, welcome today. It's so wonderful to have you all. Just a bit of housekeeping for everyone who's on the call. Please, if you could stay mute, and if you've got any questions, put them in the chat. And we will actually take them on board. We have a long list of questions to get through. Let's see how we go in an hour and a half. We will check in about 45 minutes to see if anyone needs a break. But otherwise, we find that we do just use the hour and a half quite quickly, and it is being recorded. Yeah, please respect each other. If you are allowed to, if you are open to ask the question and you'd like to ask a question with audio, please also state your name and your role. That would be great as well before your question. I'm going to start with a pretty basic question that we've been going through with our panel and other panelists, and I would love your input into this. I'm sure we're going to get some really great insights. So I'll start with you, Derek. Tell us a little bit about your role, because I know you've had quite a few different roles over the years. What's your current role, and how is accessibility important to you?
So I'm the VP of product accessibility and inclusive design, and I've actually had lots of questions about my own role, especially when I first started here at Salesforce 2 years ago, because I'll be honest, I was confused because I kept seeing other people, or there was this one other person that I'm like, if I'm the VP of accessibility and inclusive design, how is this other person a VP of accessibility, and how does that fit? What's our relationship with the Office of Accessibility? So Salesforce has an Office of Accessibility that tends to work on accessibility for our own employees, from not just from an HR perspective, but from an events perspective, from a real estate perspective. There's just so many different aspects of accessibility, and so that group tends to focus on that side of things, and my role is very specifically within product. So we have lots of different organizations. That Office of Accessibility rolls in up under our legal and HR kind of function, but my role is very specifically within product. And so my mandate, my goals are all around making our products the most accessible products that we can possibly make them. And we have a team underneath me that work on all of our different initiatives. So I have several directors and senior directors and managers, and then a number of digital accessibility engineers, all focused on improving our products from an accessibility perspective. We do that through the practice of inclusive design, through the practice of just kind of just a consultative methodology. We have office hours for enablement and a lot of other things that ultimately mean we are working really hard to help our product teams create their products as accessibly as they can. So accessibility is like, it's everything to us. Our goal, and I think this is one really interesting thing about Salesforce. not only are we trying to make our products really accessible for all of our customers and for their customers, we're also doing it for our own employees because we run Salesforce using Salesforce software. And so there's this little interesting overlapping area where the work that we do on the product side of things intersects with the Office of Accessibility and what they need to make sure that all of our software that we use internally is accessible for our employees with disabilities. So there's this kind of really interesting confluence there between the two groups. And we both have this, pretty significant interest in making sure that everybody that uses Salesforce can do so and be included with all the value that our software brings. So really, really excited to have that perspective where we're seeing it from multiple angles, and it's really everything that drives me forward. It's been my passion in my life's work for the last 25 years, and it continues to be. And it's just so important to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be included and to participate and to have agency and have really meaningful employment. And I'm excited to be able to do that through our products.
It's really exciting. And I guess to that aspect of internal products, there was always a push for external, but now understanding that internal, and that's how we're actually going to change culture internally as well, is really important. And Sean, lived experience here, and maybe you could share a little bit about your role at Telstra and how accessibility is important to you there.
So Telstra, over the last 4 years, has radically changed our approach to accessibility. We've adopted a spoken hub system where we have a core group of people who are working on our strategies and any major initiatives we've working on. Then we have people, which is the rest of the team, who are focusing on specific, well, they're embedded into what we regard our key assets, and they are embedded in there, and they live and breathe with those product teams. So there could be anywhere from 2 to 3 specialists in those products supporting up to 6 to 10 teams, or what we call in Telstra feature teams, who are actually building the different journeys, the new functionality that we introduce into whatever the product is, such as My Telstra, the t.com website, the main website, our enterprise Telstra Connect platform, our purchase to order. We have a group that's working on it for supporting our internal teams who are frontline support people, where we're updating the application they use internally. So we're a group that work on that. Our loyalty program, documentation. So recently, just to highlight how important it is, recently we've ensured all our PDF bills that we send out are accessible. So we're talking about 2.5 odd million bills per month. And when they go out, the actual PDFs are properly tagged to make sure they are accessible.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah, well done.
So we also, we go through uploading in PDFs. That also gets reviewed. So we have a team there working focused on that. So we're really trying to move the needle from accessibility point of view. Recently, Telstra website received the Accessibility Award, and now my memory is going to escape me, of course, from the Centre for Accessibility over in Western Australia recently. So our website, corporate website, got that to just demonstrate the effort we're putting in, the extra milestones. Part of our whole process, we include people with disabilities as part of the testing. We try and do it in the prototyping or any other parts of the stage. Accessibility is built into the whole life cycle of product development. It's just not done at the end. We're continually updating our internal documentation to improve. We are moving quite rapidly to 2.2, and by June we will be, or actually by April we'll be auditing on 2.2. We have certain regulations that we have to follow, and just so you know how serious we take it, level A, and it's part of that regulation, any consumer-facing assets that go out have to meet a level A standard, or that part or that new feature of the asset will be held back and will then get uplifted. Obviously, we do have, you know, a process in place in those situations where we will do it after the fact, but, you know, 95%, 99% of the time, assets go out with fully level A compliant, due to, you know, to adhere to the certain regulations we have to adhere to, but also to have a process where we're not accepting, "Oh, we'll fix that later" approach, which does happen in other spaces in the tech world. So it's a different model than some people, some organizations, but we take it, you know, that's just showing some of how serious we take this thing. You know, and it's the thing with someone who lives with a disability, it's advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is, yes, I can, you know, for the specific disability, being vision impaired, I can look through that lens. But the disadvantage, I have to make sure I'm not, as a person, when people come to discuss things, I'm coming from a neutral point of view. I'm not trying to influence it from my point of view, how I would like to see it come. Because I'm a person, I'm not the community of people out there. There's so many other people out there who will use their technology and have certain issues depending on their disability, or have multiple disabilities and so on. I was trying and ask the questions to the people when they ask the questions, how do you, you know, we have but I'll put it this way, we have a healthy conversation to try and work out what's the best approach. So that's how Telstra, in a nutshell, we do it. We're also looking at procurement programs. So it's right across the organisation. We're, you know, a lot of different areas we're trying to improve the whole world of accessibility.
It's excellent. And it goes to show that it is a culture change in an organization, doesn't it? When you have to look at it that way, you really have to start thinking differently. And Gerry, that's something that you've obviously found at the ABC. Would you like to share a little bit about your role and how accessibility is important, but also how that's integrated? Because there's a lot of hiring going on at ABC, right?
Not as much as I'd like,
I should say, yeah.
but that's a perpetual problem, I think. Really interesting to hear both Derek and Sean's perspective and the journeys and maturity that accessibility has had in both organizations. Accessibility really is a journey. When I started at ABC nearly 8 years ago now, unbelievable. I've never been in a job as long as I've been in this one. When I started nearly 8 years ago at ABC, accessibility was one of these. I'm sure many people will understand and relate to this, but accessibility was seen as something that was that we had to do. We didn't want to spend a whole lot of time and effort on, because there were other things that were more important. And let's face it, why are we putting in all this energy and effort to help a few people with disability in Australia? Where's the financial Where's the financial benefit? Yeah, these are all the sorts of things that I heard when I started. When I started at ABC, I brought my experience from Vision Australia, which was an auditor. So I'd audit our websites mainly, because mobile apps were not really even a thing yet. But I spent time auditing our websites, and we had way too many websites then. For against WCAG compliance. It was WCAG 2.0 at the time, and for every issue that I found on a website, I'd write a JIRA ticket. For anybody who doesn't know what JIRA is, you really need to find out about what these bug trackers are all about, because they will help you in your journey knowing. So these are tools that the product teams use to track issues with their websites, with their apps, that sort of thing. Anyway, so I'd write up these issues. These issues would go into the bucket list of stuff that the team had to do. But of course, there were lots of other tickets there, and accessibility issues still were deprioritized. So all of these issues that I wrote up, and I'm talking about thousands of issues across all of the websites, they all ended up deprioritized. Nobody ever looked at them.
Yep.
Didn't work. The approach didn't work. So started looking at different ways to achieve accessibility compliance, as it was back then in the role. So I started working more closely with the teams rather than barking at the teams about the importance of accessibility. I started thinking more about the work that they were doing, and I thought the best way to achieve accessible outcomes is by talking to them earlier, like before they start building these products or making changes. That's when I should be talking to them about it. But I didn't have a whole lot of experience at this. But it turns out this is really what inclusive design thinking is all about, and the idea of shifting accessibility left to have more of an influence at the design stage rather than the build stage. Now, I have to say it took me years to get to that point, and it's still a journey, and I'm still learning every day. Well, ABC doesn't have the size of the teams that are dedicated to accessibility that some other organizations do. I feel that it's really, because of that, what I've found to be very, very useful is working with teams, working with product teams, much like Sean was talking about working with Derek was talking about how they have different product teams devoted to accessibility. Well, we've got product teams that are devoted, of course, to the product. We have a product team for ABC iView and a product team for ABC Listen. Those product teams will comprise designers and researchers sometimes, developers, there'll be a product manager, there'll be a tester, and they work in agile methodology to roll out changes and continuous updates every couple of weeks, 2-week sprints. So I think a lot of people will be familiar with that. So we started looking at working more closely with these teams, looking at what they were designing in a sprint, and talking to the designers about how they, some of the things that might make those designs more inclusive, and giving input into those designs to help developers create accessible product from those designs. So the end result was that every 2 weeks, we'd end up with improvements that were more likely to be accessible. And this is
and those backlog tickets are not hidden anymore, are they? They're out there. So you're actually working with them with accessibility on the tickets that they're working on. It's a very different approach. Exactly. I might get to a couple of the next questions if that's all right. We've already half an hour in. But it's wonderful to hear the backgrounds and how these are progressed. And I guess that shift left particularly is important in all of these 3 organizations. And we've started to think about that in OZeWAI. How do we kind of bring that to accessibility specialists who usually just do testing? How do they help their organizations shift left? And we know then that it's not necessarily around technology anymore, then, is it? It's about understanding who the people are. So there's a whole different knowledge and understanding that needs to happen in that user research phase. So I'm going to get to the inclusive research part in a moment, because I think that's really important that all 3 of you do that. But first, I just want to ask, what are some of the biggest challenges you face, and maybe as you as an accessibility specialist, and where do you go for support and guidance? I'll go to you first, Derek, if you like.
I would say one of the biggest challenges that I face almost daily is we at Salesforce, we lead with our values. Right? We have a set of core values that we all believe in, that everybody agrees, are things that make us who we are. One of those core values is equality. So it's great to have that. The challenge is, despite the fact that everybody believes in that, I've not met a single person here in my 2 years at Salesforce that has said, we don't think this is something that we should do, that they don't believe in accessibility, right? Everybody is on board. the biggest challenge that I face, that we face, is prioritizing accessibility when there are hundreds and hundreds of priorities that everybody needs to deal with on a daily basis, whether it's engineers, whether it's product managers, whether it's designers. They are all having a lot asked of them all the time.
Yep.
And it's very easy for accessibility to be just this one other thing that, you know, that we have to deal with, versus it being something that is really fundamental and core to living our values. And so that's challenging, because that prioritization that people face in an enterprise environment is there's even just the mental gymnastics that somebody needs to do to be able to figure out, how am I going to get all of this work done? And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I face here, that I intellectually understood that coming into the work here, but I live it differently. I have different experience with it now than the way I understood it back then before I started, right? I understood what that meant, but wow, I now really understand it differently, having lived it. So
and what kind of things do you have in place to help kind of manage that challenge? You know, I've some of the places that, you know, that I've worked in, I've noticed if you have champions networks or brown bag lunches, or ways that people can actually talk about things together. Is that the kind of thing that you do as well?
We have all kinds of things like that, but I think the number one tool that we have here, and this is no secret, I mean, everybody, this is public information. We have a planning tool, an alignment tool that we call the V2 Mom, right? And it's, so V, as in the letter V, stands for vision and values. So that's the V2. And then the MOM, MOM, is methods, obstacles, and measures. And our V2 Mom is a tool that we use throughout the entire organization to connect every individual's work to the vision and the values and the important things, the methods and the measures of success for the company. And I think that as a tool really helps to have all those discussions, so that I can share what's really important with me. These are the things that we need to work on this year. We need these 4 partners to work on that with us. So we create this shared understanding through this V2 Mom, where I have my V2 Mom and our partner organizations have theirs, and we align and make sure that we spend a significant amount of time making sure that the things that we need for success are on their V2 Mom, and the things that they need for success are on ours. And I think that alignment tool, more than anything, is one of the most powerful forces that we have here. So when it comes to, you know, how do we navigate that, it means that I have in my entire management chain a cascade that goes all the way up to the very highest levels of the company and all the way down to individual contributors.
Yeah.
And we're all in alignment. So when things look out of alignment, or we're facing some of those issues, we go back to the V2 Mom and we have those discussions with our partners, and we actually talk about how these things are, you know, commitments that we've made, and they're in line with our vision and values. And that's an incredible tool to have, not just from working with others, but working within our own management chain.
Yeah.
Being able to talk that same language is it's pretty amazing.
And I think that's the whole point too. It's not something that's in one person's head that you have to kind of guess. It's something that you all kind of agree on together, because it's public and it's transparent, it's open, and you've discussed what it means to each other. You know, when you start talking about different, design standards or things like that people, or activities or way that people work, unless you're all aligned, you're just going to be guessing what someone else is doing. So that's a really good point. What about you, Sean? What do they do at Telstra? What do you do when you get a big challenge? And what is it, if you've got one that you've got handy? And where do you go to support and guidance?
So I'm going to do it in reverse, because I like to do things in reverse. What we do as support as our team is we always go out to the broader accessibility community. So there's certain key people in our team will go and do lots of research if there's any curly questions that comes from the product teams regardless if it's a development design or questions that we raise. So they'll go to the other professionals. They'll go and they'll build their own test cases, etc., to work out what is the issue. It could be that why is that decision made for the standards, things of that nature. So GitHub is one resource we use heavily, but there's a lot of other articles and forums that people go to and resource. Then we'll come back as a collective, and on a fortnightly basis we have a internal Q&A team session where people bring questions and concerns, and all the different subject matter experts will discuss things. That's a really powerful internal tool or capability to share that information internally, because everyone's getting educated and uplifted. People can share their views on whatever the issue is on the time. So that's what we do as a way of developing and growing and self-growth as a team. We share, once we've got that consistent, and that's one of the challenges you have as a big team, consistency. Because as we all know, as being professionals in accessibility, there are challenges in the actual standards and how they are worded, because they can be interpreted in different ways.
Yes.
So, trying to get that consistency there across the team to ensure the same messaging is being said to all the different product teams is a bit of a challenge, and it's always consistently what we work on, but we get it. And that's why we do this, lots of internal communication and talking to each other. So it's having a big family to share ideas, thoughts, and conversations. And we work very closely with our design team to ensure as well, because they whenever they produce new components or patterns, they are always built into a level AA standard. Those patterns then are consumed in the product team. Obviously, to the point that Gerry said before, return on investment comes into play here. Where if you're building a new product, that return on investment comes in because that team doesn't build it; it's already done. It has accessibility built into it. They just pick it up and plop it in. On Derek's from Salesforce, they have something similar with them from their design platform. When you build in one of their environments, that's the whole advantage of the design systems. The challenges I'm going to step out of the Telstra world, because this is a global problem. It's not a Telstra problem. Is one commitment from the different disciplines out there. I'm not going to call out one specific discipline because they all have their challenges. It's the education aspect from the universities, making sure people have the right education, not just set up an accessibility course. It's actually building into the actual course. It's not just the software developers. If there's courses in a university on product management, if there's courses on marketing, all those sort of areas should have accessibility as part of that course. It should be built into it as invisible, and they're tested against it. They get they're informed about it, why it's there, but it's not an added bolted extra on, because accessibility impacts everyone. And that as the statistics and everything goes, it's going to get a bigger problem. So universities have to step up, and all those training organizations have to step up. The thing I struggle with, if anyone has an answer, how do you change some of the attitude of the different disciplines or people who are not interested? And yet they'll do it because they've told to do it, but they don't get the next thing, like just to say, okay, this is really important because I'm making a difference. I'm making it my product or what I'm building here usable by everyone. So therefore, that everyone out there is being able to get that equal access. That's another challenge. And if anyone's got that golden ticket to make it, hey, this is how we do it and solve the problem, then you're going to make a lot of money, because I don't have that one. But that's
education.
It's education. It's only our one pillar. There's other aspects to it, but
Do you find that too, Gerry, that it's an education thing, or there's so much you can do on the job training, right? Within your teams, and if you've got a good accessibility person to help you, that's great. But a lot of these people are learning these basic skills at an earlier age. And I do know that TAFE New South Wales are doing some pretty wonderful things. They actually run projects for their graduates that go into the New South Wales government that ask them to consider inclusive, approaches to those products. So there's ways to do it. I would like to see more of it. What do you think, Gerry? What do you think the challenge is for you? Is it education? Is it something else? And where do you go to for support and guidance?
Well, just stepping back a little bit, I think one of the biggest issues, and this is something I'm hearing from both Derek and Sean, we're tackling very similar issues. And at the core, I think the biggest one, I suggest, is that 20% of Australians claim and identify as having a disability, yet we're still having these conversations about the importance of accessibility and inclusive design. If we instead had an environment which welcomed and embraced and included all aspects of diversity, including disability, we wouldn't have a need for accessibility. We wouldn't have a need for this conversation. That, I think, is one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
What we find, I mean, at ABC, like many organizations, we're recognizing the inherent benefits of having a diverse workforce. If we have people from all different ethnicities and ages and genders and backgrounds and locations that they live in, then we end up with better storytelling, better products that are more relatable to more Australians. Ability is similarly just it's another aspect of diversity. And having people with disability on our workforce, creating our designs, building our products, testing our products, gives us a wealth of product input that means we end up with products that sound and look and feel like something that all Australians want to and can use. Are we there yet? No, we're not. And that, I think, that's certainly one of our problems. One of the problems that we have, of course, is that, like many organizations, the tools that we use for registering our annual leave, checking that our pay's gone into the bank, the systems that we use for messaging and communicating with other employees, and
or maybe even recruitment as well, right? Yeah,
I mean, tools like this Zoom tool that we're using to communicate with people now, how accessible are they? Now, I know Zoom prioritizes accessibility. They do a pretty good job. Other products embrace accessibility to differing degrees. Microsoft, Apple do a wonderful job. And Jess, I know you're on the call here somewhere. You and the team, you do an amazing job. I don't need to say much more on that front. I think Apple pretty much led the way for a long time in that space. The more we are working with accessible tools, the more we will be able to attract staff, because we've got an accessible work environment. And having that and being an accessible work environment means that everybody can just do the best job that they can, because the tools themselves work for everyone. That would be a great step forward. It's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have at the moment. So to your second question, how do we go about addressing that? Where do we go to for advice? We've put together a team called ABC Inclusive. ABC Inclusive is made up of people either with lived experience of disability or their advocates, people like me and my colleague Michelle. We use that as an opportunity to talk about products, to talk about upcoming events, to promote inclusion in the workplace, and to spread the word around the rest of the enterprise. So if we want to test a product, then we do have some people that we can go to. If we want to hear about how accessible different products in the workplace are, I spent some time working with a woman who works for ABC. She's a reporter. She has a vision impairment, and she needed to use some tools to get a job done, to write stories, and then to promote those stories through social media. So I worked with her to come up with these guides, which are kind of workarounds, so that she can do her job and get the job done. It'd be so much better if the tools themselves were accessible to begin. That wasn't the case in this case. But
And also, Gerry, just with the staff that that you're working with here in this is a great initiative. What about that's not necessarily their core job. Is it covered under their kind of like performance and their environment so that they they're allowed to not allowed but encouraged to be a part of that team if they want to? Or how is that seen as an incentive internally? Externally, you should pay people. So what kind of
yeah,
thing does it stop them from doing their day job as well? Like what kind of ways is that managed?
yeah, it's a great question. So again, I probably didn't explain it very well. I think the core mission of ABC Inclusive is to be a staff-led group for people with disability and their allies. It's not, their core mission is not to assess our products or anything like that.
Right.
And while we do ask questions, and we do ask people to help with that, if they want to, they can. We do certainly and absolutely go outside of the organization to get opinions from people with lived experience of disability on our products and products that we use. Do we encourage people? We ask the question. We ask if people are interested in giving us some input into those products, but it's not the core mission of the group.
No.
It's more about ABC Inclusive is all about creating a feeling of identity, a feeling of belonging, a feeling and an understanding that it's okay to have a disability at the ABC. It's something that it's respected. Everybody is appreciated regardless of their ability. And this group is there to embrace and encourage and foster that feeling of belonging. Yeah.
No, that's great. So just I'm going to kind of take stuff a little bit with your accessibility teams. I'm just going to jump to you, Sean. What are the big challenges and opportunities do you think in growing those teams, those accessibility teams that you have?
The biggest challenge in Australia is lack of talent. If you're on a growth spurt or you're trying to maintain what you currently got, finding the right talent with the right skill set within this country is a challenge, because it's a lot of people out there, but if you compare it to other sort of professions, it's not as many, and it's a big variety of skill sets out there. So that is one of the challenges we have, is getting the right talent. Sometimes we bring someone in who's not quite to the level we want, and we have to skill them up. Other organisations have done grad programs where they bring grads into the accessibility team, and they build those people up, and they become strong advocates for this whole space. So that's one of the challenges. Again, touching on the point about university in Australia, yes, there are some courses now designed for just accessibility, but there is for someone to go and do those courses, are they going to come out into that course with the right knowledge, with the right expertise, being able to land a job? That's the question I just throw out there. I don't have an answer for it.
No, it's a bit hard. You don't know that you don't. It's like it's not just WCAG anymore, is it? It's the strategy, it's the thinking, it's how you support the designers, it's how you support and also maybe even running research with people with lived experience. Doing that's safe and practical and within budget and all those kinds of things. They get asked so much more.
The standards are the baseline. Everything else on top of it is and understanding not having preconceptions on what someone who uses assistive technology, how they'll use that technology and how it should be built into the technology, is one of the things that doesn't get taught in courses. And I don't know if you can put in the courses, but if it's something you learn from experience and people get involved with the disability community. There's a statement from a presentation I was at from a CEO who builds technology for people with disabilities. He says society places limitation on people with disabilities. So it's a very interesting, when you sit back and think about the actual statement, and you look and really look at how society is, and just look at the technology. And in the music world, if I go and buy an amp, or I want to buy a new stove, or I want to buy something that's out there, has that technology been designed for everyone to use, or has that technology been designed for the majority, and I think everyone here should know that answer. But yeah, that getting back to the talent pool, it is, you have to, when you get a certain side, start building programs to upskill people internally in the organisation for grads, or being accepting to bring on someone who doesn't quite have the skill sets and upskilling them if they're willing.
That's great. What about you, Derek? How do you kind of manage those challenges and opportunities in building larger teams of accessibility specialists?
Yeah, it's a significant challenge. I think this is a pain that people feel worldwide. I don't think there's enough. Accessibility is such a niche profession that there's just not enough. There's not enough people, and I know that one thing that we experience and have experienced, and this is beyond my experience at Salesforce, this is since the beginning that I've kind of noticed this. There is that over-indexing on the technical side.
Yeah.
And we're completely underselling the importance of accessibility as part of user experience. And we think of it in many ways as, oh, this is an engineering problem to be solved, and accessibility is all about the code. And the reality is, I think we all know this, or if not, we should be really familiar with the fact that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines don't represent all disabilities. There's good representation in there, and let me rephrase that. It's not that they don't necessarily represent all disabilities. It's that a lot of people's accessibility needs related to their disability may not be something that meets that threshold of being objectively testable enough to be within the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
And then when you've got overlaps as well, right, of different types. So, exactly.
It's a massive challenge. So I think that understanding is something that we certainly need more of in the industry, that this is, there's a technical component, but there's also a massive piece of this that needs to be understood from a holistic perspective. And I think I get very opinionated about this, so I'll share this really quickly. But I think a lot of the education that we have done in this industry for the last 20 plus years has been very technically oriented and very success criteria WCAG driven. And it's a good organizing principle in many ways, but I think what it tends to lead to is we are driven by the technical and not by user needs. And so I think what we need a heck of a lot more of is, which is why I think this inclusive design is really important for anybody that is getting started into the accessibility field. I think it's critical that we start with experiences of people with disabilities and understanding that, and that the technical standard has risen from and come from the needs of people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And that's the way that things work, and that they flow, and that we will continue. As I said, I get quite opinionated on this, but we will continue to learn things from working with people with disabilities on new technologies about what their needs are and what things we can bring to the technical standard, and then which things don't belong in the technical standard, but still help us create better experiences for people with disabilities. And I think that's and I'm oversimplifying it, and I'm saying, making things for people with disabilities, knowing full well that we're actually, the best way to do it is to design and co-create with people with disabilities. So I don't literally mean for, but that to me is one of the biggest challenges, and something that is really hard for people that are new to the field, because most people come into this field the other way, via the technic,al side.
It's a different way of thinking. It's a different mindset, because you're thinking about that person, not the technology. So we've started developing some inclusive research workshops through OZeWAI to start to train, and understand, just basically co-facilitating with some of our members So they share what it's like to be involved in research. So researchers are not scared or worried about what they say. You know, everyone's just there to do their job and be helpful. So include them. So taking on that, and going to you, Gerry, 5 tips, because you do this, you've got the agile, you work with people. What are 5 tips, or even just a couple of tips on how to best to include usability to get an accessible outcome?
Sorry, to best include
Usability, or as in inclusive research or inclusive design, to get an accessible outcome. A couple of tips for people.
Yeah, great. Ask questions early. As Derek just mentioned, as Sean has mentioned before, this accessibility should be led by people with disability. So ask questions. Don't assume anything. There are organizations that can help if you don't have the resources internally. We certainly go out to organizations that can help us get input from people with lived experience of disability, and let that guide your development. Besides anything else, it's going to save you a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money. So it is a very effective way to get good information, good advice up front, early in the design stage, before you put any effort into building anything.
That's great. And OZeWAI, if you're considering joining, or just keep an ear out, we run projects in that way to start that shift left thinking as well. So we'd love to have people involved in that. And so Sean, what about you? What's a couple of tips that you would say to include inclusive research or inclusive design to make something more accessible?
So I'll answer it in 2 parts, because I want to touch on what Derek mentioned, because he rang a bell for me.
Okay.
So what he said is very valid. So when anyone develops a product, they should be coming from the user's point of view, not from the business requirements does come into play because you're trying to achieve X, but when you're looking at the user flow, the journey, you have to look at the user's point of view. So unfortunately, I think in 3s for some reason. Don't ask me why. But you've got the design aspect, which is what what we're talking about now, inclusive design, and making sure it is. So that's one point of the triangle. The other point is the actual people. So Jeremy sort of touched on that about people with disabilities. I see that, yes, that is a core aspect, but you can have someone who's situational, permanent, and or temporary. So
Yep.
there's a range of cohorts. One key thing is don't focus on a disability group. Make sure you include in the whole community. So there are certain times that you'll find it's easier to lean towards another group because it's just simpler to do. But you have to make sure, if you're going to do it at prototyping or at the wireframing stage, you try and include everyone. We've done some research in that space to see how difficult it is and trying to do it. Don't come in with preconceptions, which has already been touched upon. But still, that is an aspect. The other aspect is still you need the technical angle as well. So they all have, they all have to be balanced. They all have to be in aligned, because if one gets out of whack, then you're not going to get the actual end result, is making a product that is usable by everyone in the community.
That's great, Sean. Now, look, we're coming up to an hour in. If anyone does need to take a break, who's listening in, please do so. Maybe do a stretch or grab a glass of water while you're listening. Panel, are you all feeling comfortable? We've got another half an hour to go. Yep, excellent. We're doing some stretches there. All right. Right, I might move on to something a little bit more. There's a message that came in, Sean, from it's a little bit more technical. So I will go to you, and then I'm sure Derek and Gerry will have an answer too. So developers today are expected to know more. Should a developer know accessibility to make accessible interfaces, or merely be aware of accessibility and know when to bring on accessibility expertise? After all, security is its own discipline, and developers aren't expected to know the details of how to make something secure. So just kind of a little analogy where things are going now, is a developer expected to know everything? And this was particularly asked initially for you, Sean. I hope we're comfortable answering that one.
There's so many ways I can answer this question, because you're just like, you're ringing certain bells. Because when I look at how it depends what platform you're looking at. I do think developers out there should know about accessibility. They should understand the standards. They don't necessarily have to be an expert. They should be willing to do research and be willing to learn and grow. That's why when I in the past have done development, I enjoy it. And when I dabble in development, that's why I enjoy it, because I'm growing, I'm building something, I'm getting, I'm creating something, and that's my creativity side in comes into play. So I do think even in security, yes, they might not understand the ins and outs of it, but they still there's certain aspects they need to understand. Depending if you're a real tech nerd like me, like when I was in a previous life, I was an engineer in networking, I got down to pretty deep to understand what the hell's going on. But yeah, I do think it is part of the developer's role, especially if they're a front-end developer, or today what people prefer to have full stack developers. They still need to understand the basics, concepts, and how to apply it. And it does vary from product to product, because there's so much time I see products that developers who aren't even applying standard HTML standards. So when they build a web page, it's all divs.
Yeah.
So why aren't they using all the HTML tags out there? Because once you do stuff like that, it takes a lot of pressure off the developer if they're using it in the right way. And React and all the other type of platforms out there, you can develop using standard HTML and still leverage the power of React. So yeah, I do see it's a requirement. It depends how deep they go, but I do think it is a requirement. Same for designers, same for UXers, and same for product owners. There is a certain level of responsibility and ownership they have to take on board.
So Derek, on that, how much do you put into kind of like hiring people with that, understanding that skill set? What do you look for your teams that have to have so much knowledge of accessibility or not?
Yeah, so for our team, we expect a pretty high level of accessibility expertise, or they excuse me, they wouldn't be part of our product accessibility team. What we do try to do, though, is to influence all of the other product teams that are hiring. And I take a look at it like, there's I think Sean said this, there's different levels, right? So if you take 1,000 engineers, I expect all 1,000 of those engineers to know how to do some keyboard testing, right? As one example. But I do not expect all 1,000 engineers to be able to use a screen reader, right? I don't expect them all to know everything about every single keystroke that is required to make a certain type of widget work. But I might, out of that 1,000 engineers, I might expect maybe 100 to be able to get really in depth into all the keystrokes that are required to make an accordion work, or a combo box, or some other a modal dialogue, and understand all of that. And I might expect 10 out of that 100 to be able to go really, really deep and understand it at that level. So I think we have to look at the way when we're hiring, for example, or you can't just be thinking about hiring the one person. You got to think about this, how we're going to scale this. And so I picked 1,110, but it could be 110 and 1. It could be some other number. But I think when you're hiring across a role on the whole, you have to say, these are the things that we want everybody to be able to do. That's their minimum. We enable people on how to do that. There's another chunk that need to be at this level. And then, here's a group that can go much more in depth, so that you get that kind of coverage. And you can be sure that the masses of people, whether the masses equals 10 people, or it's 1,000, or it's 15,000, that everybody can do some of these core basic things that you expect them to have. Like I expect, and we talk about this internally a lot here, we expect people to be able to do keyboard demonstrations of their work at any time, right? That's one of the things that we are building towards, and that's critical. So I think you have to approach it from that way. It's the only realistic way of doing it. because
Yeah.
you will, otherwise it's just absolutely overwhelming. Not everybody needs to be able to do every single thing with the screen reader to be effective as an engineer, for example. So that's my / our approach to thinking.
And I
about it.
guess there's an aspect of people, as you say, we're all learning every day. I learn something every day in the accessibility space. If you're open to learning something new, then you might find from your teams that they might move around. They're actually more interested. So, you know, those that are interested in accessibility tend to probably maybe move around to different teams because they are interested in learning rather than getting down into the deep areas of code maybe, and more into that kind of overarching accessibility support. Gerry, what about you? What do you see as important in kind of designers, developers? You know, how much do they need to know accessibility in your team?
Yeah, look, in years gone by, it used to frustrate me that we would engage developers that had no knowledge or understanding of accessibility. And that was a problem. That's not the case anymore. Accessibility is something that's written up into requirements for positions, but we don't expect people to be accessibility experts. That's my job. It's more important from my perspective that the engineers get the information that they need in order to make an accessible component or an accessible product. How can they do that? By getting the right ingredients up front. So if we give them requirements through design that include accessibility requirements, then we leave it with the engineers on how they go about doing it. So Derek mentioned before, he talked about accordions and different components. From my perspective, it's more important that the engineer will think with that accordion about what needs to be conveyed. So those design requirements would state, okay, well, when the accordion is collapsed, it needs to explain to a screen reader user what it is, how it works, and what its state is. That's working. Wow, how about that? I haven't thought about this in a long time. 4.1.2. So we need to convey the state, what it is, so that people understand how it works. Then we need to make sure that if somebody taps to it, they can see what's focused. And if all of this is explained in accessibility requirements, and we leave it up to the developer on how they're going to build it, ideally, and more, they're going to be using systems that are already in place. We have a pattern library, a component library, so they can grab that component from the library, which should be accessible to use as is. And then we have testers that will test against those requirements to make sure that everything is achieved. Do the engineers need to be experts when it comes to screen reader use? No, but it helps if they do know how to use it.
Yeah.
Most of our engineers are working on Macs, so they don't have access to commonly used screen readers like JAWS or even NVDA, but they do have access to VoiceOver. So we had a workshop the other week where one of our engineers led an investigation into using VoiceOver on a Mac as a screen reader.
Nice.
Right. You know, and but if they need to go beyond that, then they can always defer to people like me or Michelle for advice. Yeah. So do engineers need to be accessibility experts? No. Do they need to know? Do they need to get the information and have an interest in building this with some ideas on how to do it, under an understanding of resources like the W3C's Authoring Practices Guide, the APG? Do they need to know where to go to get this information? Whereabouts our pattern libraries are? What accessibility smarts have been built in to give them this information? Yeah, they do.
No, that's great. I'm going to go to a little bit more into detail around this, around you know, supporting those organisations that may be not ahead as like your three organisations are in this thinking. You know, there's an accessibility specialist maybe on their own. I know in government here, some of them are on their own in government trying to support teams as well. They could be struggling to get buy-in from some of the executives and their colleagues to be involved. What's your best advice for them? I might go to you first, Derek, if that's all right.
Yeah, I think I could answer this in a bunch of different ways, but I think this is heavily influenced by where I am right now, and frankly, things that I've needed to get really good at. I think understanding the art and science of influence is one of the most important things for people in this space to do. We need to know what motivates people to act, whether we're in a small organization or in a large organization. We need to know which
drivers,
what business drivers are there. We need to be able to tap into both the logical and the emotional side of things. We need to be able to do all of those things in order to have the influence that it takes to get the job done, whether you're a person of department of one or of hundreds. That value of influence is like, you can't understate how valuable that is.
It's big ask for accessibility specialists out there, right? To start, to be able to think that way, trying to provide that. I know Greg Alton might be on the call, and he talks about, understanding what when I said drivers, he's mentioned that before at a leadership level. What are those things that are really important to them? How can you put your responses into space? And Greg actually put his camera on. Are you going to kind of talk to that quickly, Greg, and say hi to everyone?
Yeah, hi everyone. Look, just picking up on that, Bri. If I'm looking, say, from a government perspective, we know our organisations have legislative obligations that they have to meet, and therefore, as secretaries and executive directors, they have mandated responsibilities to meet those things. It's how we then connect the dots for those people to see that this is part of their business of usual responsibilities. For too long, there's been a disconnect. They see cybersecurity on there. They see a whole range of other things that they go, oh, yeah, that's what we've got to do. Make sure we've got the processes and the governance in place. We go, accessibility is just part of that. And that's, what we've now got in place at Service New South Wales.
Thanks, Greg. And what about you, Sean? Is that something that you've seen change? What kind of that buy-in that has to happen? It seems to be snowballing for you now. You've seen a change?
We've seen a change. It's already baked in before we started to a degree, but with the changes in the regulations that we have to adhere to, it has helped a lot. I've worked in both situations in an organisation where luckily there's been regulations that support you with the discussions, and another organisation that there were certain US Section 508 regulations, things of that nature in place. That is something that can help you with influencing people. But what Derek mentioned is a really key point, and understanding those drivers is one of the really important skill or ability for anyone to go and influence. If you're trying to influence a sales team, let's say you're in a marketing team, or the sales and they're selling consumer products, have some figures up your sleeve and say, hey, worldwide there's $13 trillion spend here. We're selling a worldwide product here. If we don't jump into help get into that market, we're missing out on that big market pool of money. That group of people, they won't spend money.
That's their driver. Exactly.
That's an example of a driver. So there's many ways of doing the drivers. I always prefer the carrot and the stick, and the regulation is the stick, and it's getting people to understand at the different levels, saying, hey, look, there's throwing statistics at them and saying, hey, look, there's 20% of the population, as Jeremy mentioned, has a disability. If you're, by the time these people hit 65, that comes up to around 40 to 50%, etc. That helps people in realizing the big impact. The biggest challenge I do see is outside the consumer world is B2B, business to business. That is when it gets much more murky and challenging, and that's when your influence has to go internal to influence your relevant product procurement team, your your different organisations are buying products, and the company organisation, I think Derek might have touched, and Gerry touched on this, is building in processes and programs inside the organisation to ensure when that people are building, buying new products or building products for the employees, that it is part of your procurement program. It is a item that has to go through to make sure that that product is accessible, and hence when you're going out seeking for new talent, new pool, those people with disability who have a valuable addition to your organization to add different talent, they can thrive in the organization because they know that they can use the technology, they can build a career in that organization, and that is something that's not quite there. Let's just say that.
And I think that's the culture change that needs to happen, right? So if you've got the culture change, you're starting to maybe think about more of those products that people want to use. You want to hire people. You might advertise, hey, the products we use are accessible, and if not, we want to work with you to make sure that we're going to jump from this product to something. I've never heard of anyone doing this, by the way. But Gerry, is that something that you've kind of seen as a culture change in ABC? Is that it's now internal?
Yeah, very much. I used to, I hate to say it, I hate to admit it, I used to very much be a stick before the carrot person. I used to wave WCAG and legislation in organizations, plural, faces regularly. If they don't do this, then they're at risk of getting sued and all this sort of stuff. And I just found that doesn't work at all. It's not about that. You got to build desire. It really comes down to selling it well, to build desire in people to want to get it right. So, like Sean said, I believe very much in the carrot before the stick. I think of it in a couple of ways. The first one is make it personal, as Sean said as well. The incidence of people who put up their hand and say, I have a disability, to the Bureau of Stats is around about 20% of people, but that increases as we get older. It's around about 50% of people who are seniors. But if we, as Sean I think mentioned earlier, if we look at Microsoft Inclusive's model of inclusive design, and we look at situational, temporary, and permanent disability, really everybody is at risk, and everybody benefits at least at some point in their lives from the improvements that we make to accessibility by inclusively designing product. So make it personal. It really impacts everyone. And once you get that message across and people in upper management understand that, it's much easier to get this across. Try and get accessibility built into organizational plans. So we've got a diversity, inclusion, and belonging plan. We also have a content plan. One thing we don't
put it in there, exactly, overlap them,
it's
right?
all over it. One thing we don't have is an accessibility plan, because the last thing we need is another plan.
Separate, yeah.
And I'd rather build it into the plans and the structures that we already have in place. And that process is working well. The other part of it was to celebrate successes. It's so important to celebrate those victories that we have, because that inspires people to keep doing better. The ABC has been the recipient of several awards for the work that we've done, the improvements that we've made in accessibility. We also celebrate our victories through staff-led groups like ABC Inclusive, like we have diversity and inclusion teams across the various parts of the ABC. And we very much celebrate the successes and the inroads that we make. We look at opportunities like Global Accessibility Awareness Day as opportunities to run events that celebrate the achievements that we've made. International Day of People with Disability, and various dates around the year. They're just simply trigger events, trigger dates that give us the opportunity to celebrate what we're doing. And this constant talk is inspirational for our teams and for our management to celebrate what we're doing and to look at ways to do better.
That's great, Gerry. And I think, there's something like the OZeWAI that we want to bring to this, is that we are a supportive network for anyone in Australia who does feel like they're on their own, right? Come and join us. We're having more of these panels. Give us ideas for topics, all that kind of thing. I'm going to finish with a couple of quick questions. We've got 12 minutes left. But can you share, Sean, I'm going to ask you, what has surprised you about your accessibility specialist career? Something that surprised you?
This might come across not as a positive comment, and I'm
It doesn't matter.
And I'm going to come from a person with a disability. This is not any reflection on any company out there, and especially not what Telstra is doing, because there is a lot of good work you're doing. But my biggest frustration, and the needle of accessibility hasn't moved as far as it should have over the last 25 years or 30 years. So I've gone back, and one of my secret passions is learning classical flamenco music and jazz on the guitar. And the number of people I've gone out to online learning to get access to the material, the response I get, we can't do that, it's too hard.
Right.
So that same comment I had 20 years ago hasn't changed. So it's
disappointing.
That's where I see, to answer your question, I see the thing. But in the flip side, when you go to other companies, and I'm not going to name any, but there is companies out there proactively doing things in this space which didn't occur 20 years ago. So it is a minefield, but I'd love to see more of the smaller organizations doing more in this space rather than the big guys, because that's where that's where there's a lot more of gaps than in the biggest space. Let's say it that way.
Yeah. They've got more chance to innovate, haven't they? Those startups, if they do it the right way to begin, they're going to actually start to address a lot of other things and maybe influence other people as well. What about you, Derek? What surprised you about 25 years in accessibility career?
I think a big part of it is very similar to what Sean was saying, but I have to say that the thing that surprised me the most is we're still having the same conversations. Like it's like fundamentally the same conversation.
Yeah.
It hasn't really changed, right? Like the technology has changed a ton.
Yeah.
But it's still fundamentally the fundamentals of user interface and creating good designs that give people the feedback and the information that they need so that people know what the thing is, how to use it, if they activate it, what's going to happen, and then having a mechanism to know whether or not that happened.
Yeah.
Almost all of accessibility, at least in the digital world and in web or apps, it's still all that, because we fundamentally haven't, that just hasn't changed, and we haven't made nearly, to Sean's point, we haven't made nearly the progress that we should have at this point. And it's and that's not just screen reader centric either. That's all disabilities. People with many different disabilities need all of those things from the interfaces that we create, and yet we're still having the same discussions over and over.
So quick to jump on the things like AI, but as soon as there's more research or more done around neurodiversity or other aspects of a type of disability, we're not seeing that same jump on the bandwagon as you do with the tech. If we could start to shift that, maybe that would be a little bit of a difference, right? So let's start thinking more about how we can work with people who we all think differently. So let's think about how that works. Gerry, what about you? What surprised you as part of your accessibility career?
I agree with Sean and with Derek. Going back to one of the first questions that we had, so when I started on my accessibility journey, I suppose, I was originally working for a New South Wales government organisation, and I was told to go off and find out about this accessibility thing. I didn't know anything about it. They didn't know anything about it. They just knew that we had to do it because some requirements had come down from the federal government saying that all government websites had to be WCAG 2.0.
The national transition strategy, wasn't it? Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. I was at DFAT looking at that. same time.
Exactly. So that was in 2012, I think, and they had to be compliant to work a 2.0 level AA by December 2015. Now that date came and went, and reportedly some 25%, correct me if I've got these numbers wrong, but as I recall at the time that they were all supposed to be compliant, 25% of government agencies had self-reported that they were compliant to level single A. So in other words, we were way off the mark. There was, at that point, there was an organization that was set up to help transition companies across to being compliant. I don't believe that happened, and to Derek and Sean's point, I don't think that we've come that far. But that's not the point of what I was going to say. What has surprised me, how the ABC has adopted the importance of accessibility and digital inclusion to the point that I haven't had to argue my case for a need to do it for years. I can't imagine doing that at ABC. And if anybody at the ABC was to ask, is this really worth it? They would be laughed at.
Yeah.
And to work for an organization that is so progressive spiritually in this space is so enlightening and so rewarding every day. And that's probably why nearly 8 years on, I'm still at the ABC. I love what I do at the ABC. And I'm surprised because, as I said at the start, I've never been in an organization as long as I've been at the ABC.
So Gerry, I was just going to say that aspect of not having to fight in some ways, right? Not having to question everything gives you a different mindset to just get your work done progressively and positively. And you think of that with a lot of people, with lived experience of disability, they're always fighting. How much more productive and more enjoyment would they get if they didn't have to fight for everything all the time? So we're here to fight for them. But it sounds like your organizations are, and for each other, I should say, and your organizations are already starting to think that way. So, which is really cool.
Sorry, Bri, if I can just say probably the single biggest surprise to me is how suppliers haven't yet come aboard. They don't seem to have come aboard the journey very quickly at all. We still need to use their product. Why aren't they prioritizing the accessibility of their product? That's something that continually surprises me when the organizations that they service are increasingly prioritizing accessibility.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to some pushback. I know with Greg and I working in Accessibility New South Wales, actually asking a lot more, and checking, with those vendors and not assuming. But I'm going to go to our last question. We're nearly done here. So it's just been wonderful. We've got 4 minutes left, and I'll just start with you, Sean. Can you share an achievement in your career as an accessibility specialist that you are proud of? So let's end on a positive. We've got a lot of work to do, but we know we've got a positive. Do you want me to come back to you? Do you want to think about that one?
No. I think that the biggest one I had was working with the Human Rights Commission. And it's before I worked for Telstra. And there's a lot of wins I've had in Telstra, but I found that as one of the biggest achievements in the accessibility space, because providing direct input in that paper that got released last year or the year before on the strategy of AI, because that's future technology, on how it impacts, how we should be considering, what things the government should be considering on a strategic level for the country, was quite powerful and impactful. I've even put some submission into one of the AI paper from one of the academic councils to myself and Scott. We put some information in there to present on this whole thing about AI, and that to me is my big win.
That's great. What about you, Derek? What are you proud of in your career as an accessibility specialist? An achievement?
There's thankfully, and I'm really grateful that there's a number of different things to choose from. Can I say two things?
Yeah,
that
go
I'm
for
really
it.
proud of?
Yes, please do.
One is the progress that we're making here at Salesforce, and the things that we're able to accomplish, and the successes along the way of the team and the people that are working with me. I think that's I'm really proud of that, because there's a lot that's gone into that, and when you see that effort pay off, it's just an incredibly rewarding feeling. And so that's kind of at a team level, and certainly some recency bias there. I'm heavily influenced by that. I think the other thing, this is also a bit of recency bias as well, but I got an email from LinkedIn that my courses on LinkedIn Learning that I have, I think one of the courses had surpassed 80,000 learners or something like that. And so
Brilliant.
it was kind of between the two courses that I've got in there, I think they're in their different iterations, it's up over like 140,000 students have taken my LinkedIn Learning courses. And it was a pretty humbling moment to just kind of soak in that for a minute, and realize that that many people have just listened and
That you're
tuned into that.
influencing. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Pretty proud of that moment as well. I think I got that email like last week, so pretty proud of that.
Congratulations. That's great. What about you, Gerry?
I'm aware that
Achievement.
we're pretty much at time, so I'll be as
Yeah.
quick as I can with this one. Got a few things. The first one is building a culture of accessibility by design always at ABC. I'm really proud of that. And to have a lot of developers, product managers, engineers, different teams all having accessibility as part of their thinking whenever they look at products or product changes is so inspiring. Audio, when I look at products, there are a couple of them bringing audio description to firstly ABC TV, and then more recently ABC iView was a momentous. It was wonderful. It was wonderful because not only do you get to see a wonderful product, in accessibility, it's not often that you get to see the impact that your product has.
Yeah.
And this is one case where we did. And the response from the community, particularly of people who are blind or have low vision, that they're able to fully participate in ABC TV. And now ABC TV, when they want, through ABC iView, is just wonderful. Hottest 100 is underway right now. Voting closed yesterday. That voting experience, fully accessible. And the countdown begins on Saturday, this Saturday.
Yes.
Now, this is an annual event.
You can listen to it from the US as well if you want, Derek. The Hottest 100 is amazing. I used to listen to it from DC.
and it's a very accessible experience. So that's something. There are a couple of examples of product experiences that I'm particularly proud of.
Oh, well done. And well done to the three of you. It was just been wonderful today. I guess that's probably one of my achievements is the OZeWAI. This is our 6th Ask the Professionals. We have got already February planned out to look at standards. We've got a schedule started for the rest of the year. If you've got other ideas of topics or you'd like to be involved in topics, we'd love to have you involved. So please reach out to OZeWAI. Join, support us, join our project. Gerry's on the committee with us as well. It's just wonderful to have you all involved. And thank you everyone for coming and listening. This will be up on our YouTube channel for everyone to see. And thank you very much to our panelists. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Bri.
Thank you, Bri.
Excellent. I'm going to stop the recording.